Call to order July 11, 2023 meeting of the North Andover Planning Board. We'll start with bond release.
About attendance.
Do we do that?
Do we? Typically.
Oh, here.
Okay.
Well, I mean, so I'm trying to remember back to pre-COVID. Did we actually do attendance before?
I believe we did, but
Okay, let's go for it. I don't know that we did. Yeah, unless someone was not here. But go ahead, let's do
okay.
it.
Chris
Koskoris,
here.
here.
Sean Kivelin.
Here.
John Simons.
Here.
Eitan Goberg.
I'm here.
Peter Boynton.
Aye.
Gemma Wilkins. Here.
Okay, and so we have two new board members, so welcome to Gemma and Chris. Chris will be our associate board member. Gemma is a official everyday board member, so welcome to you both. Please feel free to jump in, ask questions, have comments. Gemma, you will vote on anything that we need you to, unless you haven't been here for enough meetings for any continued public hearings. Chris, if there are any special permits where we don't have enough members, then we'll have you vote on those as well. And so welcome and thank you for applying and joining us with this. Also, the first time we're not doing any remote participation, so remote participation is still allowed under the law. If anybody ever needs to participate remotely, please let Jean know. But unless you tell us that you're going to participate remotely, we're going to plan as if everyone will be here in person. Same with if any applicants or anyone needs to have someone participate remotely, that's okay, just let us know. So let's start with the bond release. 229 Brentwood Circle, Robert and Eugenia Hatch request for a release of a $4,000 performance bond associated with an April 5th, 2022 watershed protection district special permit to allow for the construction of a 660 square foot single story addition and associated stormwater management system. Jean, can you tell us about 229 Brentwood Circle, please?
Yep. So the addition is complete. The site is fully stabilized. Jack Sullivan was the engineer in the project. He has provided an as-built and a certification letter stating that the site substantially complies with the approved plans, and I recommend a full release with interest.
Okay. You get a motion to, anyone have any comments or questions?
I'll make a motion to that effect.
Okay.
And I'll second.
Motion made to release the full bond amount and interest made by John, seconded by Sean. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that bond release is done. Okay, 19 Willow Street, Vincent Grasso, request for a continuance until August 15th, 2023. Gene, I'm inclined to grant the continuance, but can you just let us know why they're looking for continuance?
So it's 189 Willow Street. I hope I didn't pick 19.
189 Willow Street, yep.
So as discussed previously, stormwater peer review for this application has not started. The applicant requested that it not begin until he received some sense from the Conservation Commission. They met with the commission on June 28th, and the commission expressed, I would describe it as grave concerns about the approvability of the project, given the local and state wetland regulations. The applicant has requested a continuance in order to revise the plans.
So are they going to go back to conservation before they come back to us?
So you next meet on the 25th, and conservation is the 26th.
But so that's why we're going to August 15th, right? They're going to go to conservation before the August
Yep.
15th. Okay.
Yep.
And get a sense there of what they can and cannot do.
Yep, so their continuance is through the 15th, and I think conservation meets again before that. I'm not positive on that.
So they can either, okay, that's fine. So we'll continue until August 15th. 0 Turnpike Street, Middleton Farms LLC, application for site plan review special permit, Article 8, supplementary regulations, Part 3, site plan review, Article 10, administration, 195-10.7 North Andover zoning bylaw. The applicant proposes redevelopment of the property consisting of the raising of all existing structures, the construction of a 167,933 square foot industrial building that encompasses the towns of North Andover and Middleton, the construction of a new access drive located in Middleton, the construction of all associated parking areas, stormwater management structures, shared septic system located in Middleton, and utility installations, and construction of a 14,303 square foot outdoor storage yard located in Middleton. Project is located in the I-1 Industrial 1 zoning district. Okay, Gene, why don't you tell us where we're at with this and what we should be expecting today?
So this is somewhat unique where the project actually straddles the town boundary. It has had peer review for civil, for zoning bylaw, for stormwater, and for traffic. They're all almost complete. The only outstanding items are that the erosion control plan needs to be updated to include location for storage, materials, waste, vehicles, snow removal, things like that. The applicant has been asked to use an updated U.S. Census Journey to Work data. So currently, they've used data from 2011 to 15. Our peer reviewer is encouraging them to use it from 2019. The fire department has also submitted a list of questions and comments, which are included in the packet, that need to be addressed. Those just went to the applicant at the end of last week, so we don't have a response to that yet. At this time of the staff report, the applicant has not met with Lieutenant Kilcoyne, and if you remember at the last meeting, I encouraged him to meet with our fire department, because to date, they've really only talked to the Middleton Fire Department, and you'll see in the packet, the fire department has questions about responses and who gets calls and things like that, and so those certainly need to be worked out. And as far as I'm aware, an agreement for the water supply has not been reached. So the water supply, as planned, is coming from Middleton. The meter is in Middleton, and then it's being fed to our building. And there's been some concern raised by Middleton's administration, and so that is still an open item.
Hey, Gene, one other piece of due diligence, the septic system, I think it's in Middleton, not in North Andover, but has our Board of Health or their Board of Health opined on it and passed judgment, and have they done test pits and things like that?
So the full system has not been submitted for approval, but we did do perk tests to prove out that we could do it in that particular area.
Okay.
And there had been discussions with the Board of Health agent, who's Tracy Mello, in Middleton.
And our health department said, because it's in Middleton, he hasn't really looked at it in detail, so.
No, but
Yeah, we need to make sure that
we
it's
should be
approved.
satisfied
Yep.
that it's adequate.
Right, I mean, I think we also need to know, I mean, our health department should still look at it, even if they can't vote on anything or pass any judgment. I mean, if, let's say there was a red flag that said, okay, hey, we think you missed something big, and now that's gonna spill into North Andover, I think we need to at least look it over to say, it's passes muster. I mean, I assume
Yeah.
that's kind of where you're going with that, John?
Yeah.
Yep, so, agreed.
Once we have the septic design, and we go through Tracy to get like the high-level comments, because I wouldn't want to give you something in draft form.
No, at the end, I
Yeah,
mean,
then we'll,
yeah.
absolutely, we'll give it over.
Yeah.
Or we can condition that when final
Don't do it.
design needs to be approved by our health department as well.
that's fine.
So the only other, I guess, open item that I think we should get a summary on tonight is part of the traffic peer review encouraged a study of the intersection of Route 114, Sharpness Pond, and Saddlewood Road. And so the applicant has done a traffic warrant assessment, and that's something that Mass DOT would look for, is a warrant assessment. The result of that was, it indicates that a traffic light is warranted there, even without this project. However, the applicant acknowledges that they will contribute some traffic to this project and has acknowledged that they may need to make a contribution to the cost of that warrant. But all that would be really finalized through the Mass DOT access permit process. And so they need an access permit through Mass DOT, and that warrant would be Mass DOT's jurisdiction.
Okay, so why don't we hear about that, and then we'll come up with any questions or discussion items about that. So why don't you tell us about,
Begin with traffic?
yeah, let's talk about traffic. Yep, traffic, go ahead.
Sorry. So we did receive the comment from TEC that they wanted us to do a warrant study, and we did. So the warrant study is basically merited currently. It's based on sheer volume. They said basically that the existing conditions triggered it. You know, there's a very large residential, and then the pass-by traffic is tremendous in this particular part of town, as everybody knows who drives anywhere near 114. So when our traffic engineer basically goes to apply through MassDOT, what we will do is we trigger the warrant. We give them the information, they see it triggers, and we'll request that a light be put up. The issue is that we don't cause the situation, so we aren't responsible, and MassDOT won't make us responsible for installing the light, but we would have to contribute to it, as Ms. Enright said. So we actually have to put forth, though, our access permit with that information in it. And MassDOT makes its determinations. As everybody knows, that can be a painful process, but it most certainly meets the warrant.
If there were a light, it would be, I presume, right at Sharpness Pond Road.
I don't know where it would be. I'm pretty confident it would be it would be in that intersection. So it has to be, right? I think, isn't Saddlebrook
It's
in
directly across.
Sharpner's Pond directly across
Yep.
from one another?
Yep.
Yeah, so it'll be right in that area.
There's two exits. One is Harvest Drive, which is more towards the Middleton line,
Oh,
and Saddlewood is right at
This
the,
is of the residential
Yeah.
property.
yes. It's a driveway. It isn't really
Yeah,
even
no,
a
but
street.
I mean, the only road is Sharpner's Pond.
Yep.
I mean, yeah, okay.
and
I mean,
Saddlewood, pulling out of that residential development and trying to take a left
Is worse
is
than-
really
It's
challenging.
pretty bad,
Yeah.
and Sharpner's Pond is pretty bad too.
It
But
seems-
I think the likelihood of there being a traffic light there is pretty low, to tell you the
I'm not
truth.
sure. We did with Mass DOT, they conducted a roadway assessment at that intersection in 2019, and that didn't trip the warrant, but that was also COVID, so.
No.
That's exactly what, when you read the traffic assessment, and I spoke to Scott Thornton from Vanessa, that's exactly what he said. So it's pretty clear that in current conditions, under full use, probably prior to COVID and never during COVID, but after, it triggered that warrant. Because believe it or not, while people, I know there've been accidents there, but the rate of accidents doesn't trigger that. You know, there's a whole bunch of warrants that you could trigger, that doesn't trigger it.
Yeah, I mean, the rate of accident isn't that high, but the
is.
severity when there is one,
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
it's catastrophic.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's awful.
I think there's been a fatality in the last 5 years, is my understanding.
Yeah.
So,
So, the gist of this, and I read our peer reviewer basically agrees with pretty much all of the traffic studies. So right now, the studies say it should have a light.
Yep.
None of the town nor the applicant can actually control that, and we can't dictate that, correct, as part of anything. But we can suggest that this project would add traffic and that we think a light is required there anyway.
Yep.
So part of the access permit application, but also the town could on its own tell MassDOT, hey, a study was done because there was this project and they're saying that a light is here, can you look at that?
So we've shared the report from Vanessa, is
Yeah.
it Vanessa, right? With Merrimack Valley Planning Commission.
Okay.
And there's always discussions with Mass DOT about this intersection, honestly. It's been kind of a hot button for several years. I've also reached out to our peer review consultant with TEC and asked them to start thinking about conditions and how we could really, like, kind of lock this up in our decision to make sure whatever we can do, we condition.
I think that's really important, Gene, because if we know we're gonna add traffic and we know there's an issue with that intersection, we should be doing whatever possible documented, even if we don't control the outcome.
So that's-
I like that.
So that's my thought too, is also that when we get towards the end of this project and we see where it may be going as to whether it will be, permitted and with what conditions, that somewhat separately, because it's been brought to our attention, we may be able to pen just a short letter to our select board, to our state reps, the people who
Yeah.
have access to say, hey, this came up as part of this study, we don't have the ability to condition it, but here's this report that says this deserves a traffic light, could you look at this as part of your job, and from the planning board?
I like that.
And I think that would be something that would just be helpful in getting where we need to go, even if we can't condition it. I'm sure you guys don't have a problem with that.
no, we're most willing,
Right,
we're
yeah.
absolutely willing to
Yeah.
facilitate, absolutely.
Okay, so that sounds good. Okay, so Jean, what else is outstanding?
So that's really it. There's out of the peer reviews, there's only two things that are easily surmountable. And then the fire department, the water agreement, and
So relative to the traffic, there's one other, the journey to work. All it is distribution of trips. It's not anything material. It doesn't affect the traffic study. It's just data. And that'll be updated. Scott promised me that he would work on that, and he will get it to us, in short order. I mean, like Jean said, we only just got their peer review comments. Relative to the storm, that's easy. They're working on it. I couldn't get you the plan before tonight and back to TEC. I just couldn't do it. With regard to the fire department comments, I apologize. The engineer has not reached out to your fire department. I don't know why. It will happen. I'm going to make sure of it. I expressed to Ms. Enright that if it doesn't happen this week, then I'm going to do it, and I will make sure that the comments are addressed. But I will say that one of the comments relative to the, just so you know what they are, you're supposed to provide access, right? You have to provide access because it's pointless to have a fire department if you can't get to the building that's burning. So what we have is we have 360 degrees of access around this building. So it starts up at Main Street, comes around, goes behind the building, and comes out. NFPA, which is the guiding document, requires that you have a 20-foot wide access point. There is a lot of latitude that your fire department has, and they have a lot of discretionary ability. So we do need to prove that out with them. And we did do a full turning radius that shows that the fire truck can actually maneuver the entire site. And we deliver that to TEC. And I believe it's in one of your packages. I apologize. I think it was the one before. So there is a pinch point that I need to discuss with your fire department because it goes from 30 feet to 24 feet to 24 feet to 16 feet because it goes to a one-way. And you're entitled to do a one-way at 16, but it's up to your fire department to say whether or not, in the Middleton Fire Department, to say whether or not that's sufficient. And that's where we just need to make that happen. But we do have plenty of room. We can make it 20 feet. That's not a problem for us. So that access point and the complete turnaround gives everybody that you're supposed to have 150 feet of access or 450 feet of access to, you can't be further away than that. And we don't have that issue because we have 360 degrees. Now the one point, and I can't remember, but one of the board members actually mentioned it, that inlet, I don't know what else to call it, the driveway that goes between the two buildings, it's 400 feet long. There is a guiding principle that says anything over 450 requires, an access or an exit. With regard to that particular point, if the fire department in North Andover wants there to be a 3-point turn, we can manage that within that property. We have to do some machinations and move some of the units, but we can accommodate them, and that's just something that we have the responsibility to do, and will do that, and you will get that information at your next meeting. So to me, those are the two. For me, those are the most substantive and if you will, large issues. Although
I agree, Joe, but
Yeah.
he's asking you to prove to him that that meets code.
and it does meet code.
Okay, that's
But,
all.
well, he has some discretionary rights, so I never want to say, yes, it meets code to this board. It meets code, but he has the right to ask for a little bit more.
Yeah.
So until I know he's comfortable, I'm not going, we kind of meet the code.
So, gotcha.
I was going to ask, so the 16-foot one-way, is that on the Middleton or the North Andover side?
I think it's in, okay, right there, yes. What is that? Is that, I think it's North Andover, 100%
It's North
I can see
Andover,
it.
so the
So I
line,
need,
the boundary line is
the
here.
reason I need both fire departments, because I believe one of the questions was who gets the first call? Middleton gets the first call because the address is in Middleton. That's what I was told by Chief Lacoste. But again, I need to meet with your fire department, I think Lieutenant is
Lieutenant Kilcoy.
we need to meet with him because we would prefer both fire departments to be satisfied with all aspects.
So I understand, are you done?
No, I'm good.
I understand you have to meet with the fire departments. Good. Thank you for describing that. I want to go back to your comment about NFPA.
Yes.
Notwithstanding what the fire departments have discretion for, is anything in your plan currently not meet the NFPA?
Based on what I've spoken about with my civil engineer, no. Again, I need to make sure he's going to certify that to you because I'm not the party to certify that. I have been told that it does, but once I ask somebody to stamp it and tell me it does, I might find that there's a section. So, Mr. Boyne, that's where I stand. But at the next hearing, I will give you something that does certify full compliance,
Okay, thank you.
of course.
So how much time do we still need to potentially finish this, Gene?
Well, there's a bigger issue, so may I, with the water? So, when I first approached Middleton about the water share, and we had discussed this in the conversation with Middleton as well as Danvers, because Middleton does not control its own water, Danvers controls the water in Middleton. The conversation was that if we located the water room, the connection room where the meters are, and we did not sub-meter, but we had 1 meter for the building, that we would be able to provide water through Middleton, and we did not need an intermunicipal agreement. And that stood 3 months before I filed, it stood 3 months after I filed, and then 1 month before the old town administrator left, he said that I needed an intermunicipal agreement. Unfortunately for me, he was on his way out. He volunteered, he did not get terminated, he had another job, so I don't mean to make it sound like he didn't, he had another job. So then the interim town administrator took over. You can imagine the burden with an interim trying to do everything. So this issue has been like floating in the ether. I've called a few times, I've asked for a meeting, I've asked to be able to go over the issue, and I've met with, yes, we will. And I'm still getting, yes, we will, and as Ms. Enright knows, I haven't gotten any feedback on it. I do know, however, that there's been some contact with your town manager, so now that a new town administrator has just started work yesterday in Middleton, I am hopeful that I can then bring this together, because the water issue is an issue. I mean, despite the fact that they only use about, in North Andover, probably 1,000 gallons a day, it's still an issue, and I still need to address it. I can do that through a well, because there's ample water on site. We do know we can actually get potable water, and we can create cisterns and other aspects to be able to support the system. Plus, fire safety trumps any type of intermunicipal agreement. So worst case scenario, I can bring water in to feed all the sprinklers. I know.
But I feel like that's,
It's a horrible,
well, no, but I feel like that's all stuff that we can condition. We can just tell you that you have to either have an
If you feel-
agreement or you have to be able to provide adequate water. I don't think we necessarily need the full plans for that necessarily.
and that is up to this board. And if you feel that way, then that's even better. Then that means, quite frankly, I have a conversation with the fire department that I'm going to make sure happens in the next week, 2 weeks at most, because I'm sure there may be vacation issues, so I can resolve that. I can get you the revised plans, and I owe you perspectives. I don't know if you remember, Mr.
Yeah.
Goldberg, I think, and I'm getting them. Unfortunately for me, my architect had everybody has vacation.
No, that's fine.
But he promised me that I would have them in the next week. So I'll have the perspectives, and just to go over it so that, because I know we're short on time, I'm gonna get the perspective, I guess, this way. From the building, do you mind just bringing it down a smidge, just so I can show them exactly where I'm gonna get the perspectives from? Like if you
the
bring
next
that whole,
page?
so I can see your building, and then I can see the outline of the building next door. Nope, go up, I'm sorry. Yes, okay. So see the building to the right that's kind of behind the parking lot that sticks up? I'm in a perspective from there. I asked him to give me a perspective from the first floor and from the top floor. The top floor, you're clearly gonna see it, because their their foundation is at like 141. Ours is at, I think, 134. So they're gonna see it, but we're trying to, we try to locate the building in a way that it wouldn't be so impactful. And then we're gonna shoot it from, you asked us to shoot it from 114 for passing traffic, and we'll do that. And then we're gonna shoot it from the residents in the Middleton portion. And I think I was also going to try and shoot it from, you see the building north, that other building, the residential building? It's up, the one above it, believe it or not. Go right above, Gene, to going towards north. Oh, yes, there you go, that one. I'm going to shoot it from there as well. I think that's pretty far away because they have a lot of tree buffer, but I'm still going to give you the perspective. I think that you need to address it with, you probably want to address it with your residents. So those are the perspectives I'll give you. And if there's another one that you would like, please let me know, and I will add that to the architect's list.
Okay, so, just, well, yeah, we'll get to, so it seems like we can have most of the information by, let's say, the August 15th meeting. Either this meeting or either the next meeting, which is in 2 weeks, or that one. Let's assume that's all the case and we have everything we need. Where do you stand with Middleton? Because I think we need to be on somewhat of the same timetable, because if they come up with something which then causes you to change your plans, then we're having to come back. So where do you stand with that process?
So we meet with them at the end of the month, and we have the same status with the peer review. So it is my hope that at that meeting, we'll be very, at the same point at which you are, and we will give them the perspectives that we intend to share with you as well. The stormwater will have been done. As I said, we have the perks. We're pretty much moving toward it. So I think the 15th is better, only because it would allow me then to go to Middleton's meeting on July 27th, so that we know. So if there's some sort of a issue that we didn't know and a board member brings up, I'll be able to bring it back to you.
Just to go back to your comment about conditioning the water.
Yep.
I am fine with that, but the condition language should, I think, just take into account, let's say completely unexpectedly, the resolution, which we condition you have to get, flips, and all the water's coming from North Andover.
Okay.
That would not be okay without review.
Yep, that's fair.
And we
So-
can't do that.
yeah.
We
Can't
can't
do it.
cross the
Okay,
line.
I'm just saying,
But if it happened, you could say, if
What-
we could.
the conditioning should
Okay.
take that into account.
Middleton one.
It'll have to be that the facts as found say
Right.
where the water is either coming from A or coming from B.
Yeah.
And the conditions are that you've arranged for it through A, through a municipal agreement, or B, through a well, or whatever, and if it's neither one of those things, then
Okay,
that doesn't
fine.
satisfy, yes, so we can make that
I'm not
happen.
trying to
So-
be
Yeah.
rude, the sun is in my eye,
Yeah.
I see that.
we're at that time of year.
Just a clarifying question. So if the intermunicipal agreement doesn't happen, you have to drill a well, what side, is it the Middleton or the North Andover side did you guys spec out where you would drill a well?
I can't answer that question. It would really be dependent on site conditions. I just don't know the answer to it.
Yeah.
So those are gonna be things that are important, that if we're gonna condition, we're gonna need a lot of facts on which to condition if A happens or if B happens. If you get all the answers, much better. But if we're going on sort of educated guesses, it's gotta be pretty exact. Otherwise, you're gonna have to come back for modifications.
Right.
Yeah. And I can start to draft a decision. There's going to be a lot of holes in it right now, but
Right.
at least we'll start to frame kind of what the issues are.
I had one other question, Gene. Was early in the game when this hearing started and some residents showed up, the issue of screening was a big deal. I think probably a fair amount of the problem was due to the current conditions, not the future conditions. But two questions. One, do we have a plan we all feel comfortable with about screening? Because we haven't really talked about it very much. And secondly, have the people that live there seen it and agreed to it?
I don't know if they've seen it. They've quieted it down. I haven't gotten any calls since that initial meeting, other than one resident that I've talked to a few times.
And part of the reason is we did meet them in the hall, and the man, I can't remember his name. It's a man who is on the board. We showed him what we would do and told him we would put up a fence, because their concern was having a fence to protect them from noise. And it's had to be a solid fence, and we showed them what we were doing, and we showed them that we would add all the trees. They loved it, and I can't tell you, I can try and get in contact with him. I can't tell you that he 100% approved it, but he hasn't been back, and he liked that plan.
That's fair, and I appreciate your going out that extra step, but anytime we do commercial development that's in close proximity to residential development, that always is one of the issues that we have to be absolutely comfortable about, that we're going to come up with the right answer, and the people that know best are the people that actually live there and have to live with the consequences. So if we could do one more round of discussion on that, I think it would be well worth it for everybody, even with you. And I think you've acted in good faith, so it's not meant to be a criticism.
If you could bring it
Yeah.
up.
The last thing I want is to come forward and then say you didn't do the right thing, and then have to come back to the board because somebody's complaining. So for me, it's always better to address it before than backwards. And we know we're putting up a good fence, we know we're putting up a good screening, we're gonna do the perspective, so the conversation is actually, it's relative, it'll be relevant, because we'll have all that information as well,
So if you can go over it when we do the perspectives next time,
100%.
have the specs
Yep.
for the fencing, height, colors, images would be helpful, as
Yep.
well as for the trees, because I do remember going through that. And we did, just so everyone knows, because we had a large gap between the time when we started the hearings and when we continued them, we did renotice all of the
Yeah, we did
abutters
renotice
as well.
them, and I myself signed them up for the emails so that they get the agenda and showed them how everything's linked to it. And it's really been quiet since.
Do we need to do anything with new board members partway through this process?
I'm sorry.
In terms of who's voting on the
Okay, so,
hearing.
yeah, I have that summary, so I wanted, well, Jill's here.
4,
So
that's it.
for this application, the 2 new members cannot vote because they've already missed 2 hearings. For the Willow Street application, they've only missed 1, and they both have missed meeting forms. They're going to watch the video and sign those. But for this one, you have 4, and as you know, it requires 4 affirmative votes on a special permit.
So the 4 of us will vote on that.
Right, and we acknowledge that.
So, if anyone is going to have any meetings that they're going to miss, please let us know. We'll just have to be
Yeah.
careful on that, because if someone is out, then we'd have to.
Yeah, so for the
Yeah,
last
okay.
meeting with Willow Street, I encouraged them to continue because we would have been in an environment where neither one could vote on that one either.
Okay, good question. Okay, so, next date for this hearing, are we gonna do the August 15th? Do you wanna do,
First.
okay, August 15th?
I'm losing track here. We meet July 25th though, right?
Yes, we
So
meet
we'll
in
try
2
to-
weeks.
We meet July 25th, so we'll try to wrap all those up as early as you can so I can prepare a draft decision on the 15th, if it all works out.
Absolutely, I'll get,
So are we gonna meet on the 25th, Gene, on this, or not?
Do you think you'll have anything within 2 weeks?
I might, but not in time to have anybody look at it.
Probably
So
not.
the 15th is the
Okay.
best date.
Yeah.
Because Middleton also, on that 27th, I would like to give you a full update.
So that's fine. So we'll meet on August 15th, but if you, anything you get, just send it in as you get it so that
Immediately
we can,
to-
we can turn that around. Okay, so August 15th. Okay, great. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, wait,
You're
actually,
gonna
before we
vote
get
to
that,
do
sorry,
it?
before, Gene, did any public comment come in online? Either tonight or before tonight's meeting?
No.
Is there any members of the public that wish to say anything? Okay, did my job. All right, now we will continue until August 15th.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of July.
Thank you. Discussion item, so, draft planning board rules and regulations. I'm still working on those, we're still working on those with council, and our new members, so we'll continue to talk about that, just not ready to do that. We're just trying to figure out some rules and regulations for how we run, and the specific issue that's come up is how and when to, notice, the public, other than under regulated times and places for things, for special permits and things like that, have certain regulations that are required by state law. Are there other times we should be doing it to encourage transparency? We've been trying to work through that. So we're still working through that. 47 Bonnie Lane, 59 Bonnie Lane, do you want to tell us what's going on, where we're at with that?
Yep, so the 2 homeowners continue to work with their engineer team and an arborist to address the enforcement orders. Conservation Commission has acknowledged that progress has been made, and it is anticipating that the existing condition plan and replanting plan and the arborist report will be ready for their July 26th meeting. I've asked the homeowners to attend your July 25th planning board meeting to present these materials. And after-the-fact filing for the watershed special permit is still pending, but I talked to the engineer team today, and they are anticipating filing that for an opening of the second meeting in August. So it takes a whole month before they can get on an agenda. Hopefully by then, we've got some type of consensus on the replanting plan, and it's just really formalizing it in writing, what they have to do.
So for Gemma and for Chris, so what happened here is that these are 2 properties right along the lake, and they cut down trees where they weren't allowed to do so without getting a permit. It's a location, there are locations in town that have kind of joint jurisdictions between conservation and the planning board. So it's something that they would have needed to go through conservation and the planning board to do. So now, after the fact, after they have made this mistake, they are doing things to attempt to correct it. So right now, they're going before conservation, and that's more of coming up with a plan of how to actually fix some of the problems. And then they'll come back for us to deal with actual permitting of it. So it does happen. This is one of the more egregious instances. And so we will deal with that, but we really need more information from conservation about how the replanting would potentially be before we talk about permitting.
So do we have any indication so far, Gene, whether or not conservation is, A, taken into account what was done at Edgewood with larger caliper trees. I think Jim LaFond had said 5 to 6 inch caliper, which required great care in order for them to survive. And they did that by hiring an arborist to care for those trees for an extended period of time. For example, hanging water bags, because you need that type of steady watering. And it worked, but it required that kind of attention. So do we have any idea if conservation has gotten that feedback? And do we have any idea if conservation is considering the larger caliper trees that we had discussed before?
I talk to Amy all the time. I've talked to Jim LaFond through email. He recommended Joe Pellich, who's contacted me a couple times now. They used nurseries. I mean, that's what they did. They bought big trees.
Yep.
And in my understanding, it was six caliber trees, not
6.
dozens, 6. And
Um,
Joe, no,
But-
no,
but
Joe's
6 trees or caliper
6 that
6?
size, 6 that size,
that's
and
what I
many
thought.
other smaller ones.
Yeah,
But out of all the tree
I
planting,
think
roughly,
I said 6.
I think you said 6 caliper, right? I'm agreeing 6 caliper, but the
Yeah.
quantity was 5 or 6 trees
Yeah.
in that state. There's nurseries that buy them. There's a very qualified arborist on this team.
Yep.
And so through our discussions, we're going to wait for the arborist report and see what it says before bringing in another party. I'm not so sure conservation, if they have a professional arborist in front of them, make a recommendation, is going to bring in another party
Right.
to weigh in on that. So we're just waiting for the report at this point.
Okay, so
And I've
that-
asked Joe Pellich to just hold on now till we get that report and we can decide what the next step is.
So that all makes sense to me, thank you. What I don't understand is the sort of process flow. If we meet and we'll hear of the plan from the owners on, did you say the 25th?
Yeah.
And then if conservation meets on the 26th, if conservation says this sounds good to us and they accept it, where do we stand if we were to feel that, hey, that doesn't seem robust enough?
So you're going to be in a position where you get to give feedback to conservation.
Okay.
So you're going to see it before them, and I'm going to work with Amy the next day and convey
Super.
your thoughts. So
Great.
conservation will
But
then,
I think, Peter, to your point, my belief is our responsibility is autonomous. I mean, to be fair, we should coordinate with them the best we can, but if Concom says one thing and we say another thing, we still have the right to say something different than them, if it's more stringent.
That's
Yeah.
what I was asking, just to make sure I understand. But, so what I'm hearing with both inputs is that we will be able to provide our input to them, which will be from Jean to Amy the next day after our meeting, but we also have autonomy to act as we see fit.
And they do too, remember, I will say, I think the Concom is not, I don't think they would treat this insignificantly. They're not a pushover
And
for
they
sure,
haven't.
so I think they will. I don't think we have too much to worry about in that regard, but I think the processes are autonomous, but we should try as much as we can to use the same information and be on the same page.
So I'm agreeing with what you said about, let's share it to the extent we can. And I also agree that from what I heard at one of their previous meetings that I attended, they were treating this with, great concern. I don't debate that. My concern is this: the previous egregious lakeshore clear cutting resulted in absolutely de minimis measures. I saw they weren't trees, they were tiny shrubs. The caliper was about the size of this. You could barely see what they had planted from the grass that was growing. And they were widely spaced. It really was, there was no consequence to that clear cutting. So I hear what they said, I'm very encouraged, but what I saw the previous time was not reassuring. thus my concern.
So the fact that they're filing an application that I just said would open at your August 29th meeting means no matter what conservation says in the 15th, you're getting that plan as part of the application to you,
Okay, thank you.
after having already been able to provide comment to them, probably on 2 occasions.
Super, great, thank you.
So Gene, just a clarifying question, did they end up getting the trees that were cut down appraised? Did they do a full appraisal on that?
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
So did they get an appraisal on the
So that's-
trees that were
That's
cut
what the
down?
arborist has been
Okay.
asked to do. That's part of the enforcement order.
Got it.
Just out of curiosity, what is the quantity that they either cut down or is going to be replanted? Is there a specific,
If I remember right, at
Plan.
47, the quantity was roughly 20 trees.
Yeah.
Mature,
okay,
big trees, and the other one was a little less than that.
okay,
And as far as replanting, the standard replanting plan is usually somebody cuts down a few trees.
Sure.
And it's typically a 2-to-1 replication through conservation. But they've commented at the meeting Peter was at, that that's not going to do with this.
Be good.
Given this circumstance. So
okay,
what that number lands at is all going to be, we've got all these stumps in the ground too.
Sure.
And there's got to be some balancing between how much damage, more damage do you do to get these planted,
Correct.
so.
But these were trees, I mean, truly mature.
Right.
And I took some photos from the lake comparing those 2 houses with adjacent homes along the lake shore so that you could see a baseline. What is the norm?
sure,
And it's clear in those photos, and it's clear if you paddle around the lake, that with some exceptions, the norm is that when the trees are leafed out, you can see houses, but you really have to look for them. And that's not the point. The point is it's just an indication of the extent of tree cover along the shoreline, which is really important for protection of the water supply. And these 2 houses, it's jarring. It's
Right.
wide open. On one of them, there are no longer any trees. And on the other one, the second house started cutting after they saw the first house, and they were stopped mid-cutting.
okay.
So before they could cut all the trees, they were stopped. But it's
So it's a drastic difference.
drastic.
So one,
yeah.
and one thing we gotta remember is what our purpose and conservation's purpose are slightly different, right? So what they're going to be applying to us for is a watershed protection district permit, which means they're in a vulnerable area that if work you do could impact our water and our watershed. So that we have to say, okay, it's okay, you do work or you can't do work, but if you do, you have to meet certain conditions. So when we go back and talk with them and have them come in, that's where our focus needs to be. So when you said, Peter, like, one of the reasons upset, it's not just the view, right?
No.
It's about what that impact could have on the
Correct.
water. So when we're talking to them about replanting and things like that, that's a lot of our focus has to be, okay, you need X amount of trees because it protects the shoreline, it protects the roots, it protects things from going into the water, things like that. So that's where we need to focus, where conservation will focus on some of that, but they'll also, the trees themselves are also a bigger focus for conservation in that area, as well as fines and saying, hey, people, you have to act within the rules.
Right.
We care about the rules, but our focus is more about how can we protect the lake and keep that safe, where they have more of a focus on, okay, what should be done, how can we fix it, and also how do we make sure people are following all the conservation
So
rules.
I like the way you framed that. There is an aesthetic involved as well. The current shoreline view of the lake is in large part, with only a few exceptions, it's a wooded shoreline. From vantage points from roadways and from on the lake. That is a really nice way to have our lake. And I'm not trying to say that that's an unimportant aesthetic. I think it does have value. But I really like the way you outlined that our role is protecting is the special permit authority for the watershed, and there's multiple zones within the watershed, and the closer you get to the lake shore, the tighter the restrictions on what you can do in those zones. So I think your point was that's really our focus, although the aesthetic is also important.
Okay.
And for these residents, they have to satisfy, obviously, both boards to proceed here, right?
I think so,
Yeah.
but since we both have some autonomy, I'm not 100% sure of that.
Well, I mean, so there are different filings, right? There's gonna be a filing with conservation that they have to come up with a plan and things like that, and there's the wetland regulations and stuff like that, so they'll have to do that. And then we're requiring them to file a special permit application, which is just before our board. So, I mean, so yes, they'll have to be in compliance with those. Both of them, if you're not in compliance, can lead to fining and things like that. So, I mean, the goal should be to, as best to put it back into the way it was, and then also, how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? So that's, you know, those are the things that we have to have in mind.
And for background, in our role as special permit authority for the watershed, there've been 2 watershed studies in recent history. One, kind of the original modern one, was 1986, 87. That was the result of the Giardia infestation in the lake, was a stop boil water order. That's what resulted in the town having to design, build, and pay for the water treatment plant. It was I mean, John, you were here then, right? I was not, but it was a really big deal. And part of that was the watershed study. And that was a very thorough study that looked at the watershed, which is the surrounding land, and the lake. And one of the really, I think, important observations from that study is that 2/3 of the water in the lake goes into the lake from groundwater, the watershed. And there's a map of the watershed. In some places, the edge of the watershed is only a couple hundred yards from the lake shore. But in other places, it's a couple miles away. So it's a giant, irregularly shaped bowl. Any location in the land that would drain towards the lake, however long, is part of the watershed, the bowl. And that seepage of water is really important to us because 2/3 of the water in the lake comes through the ground. The remaining third is direct rain falling onto the water. So it's really key to the lake. Now, Gene helped organize a watershed plan update that was completed a couple years ago. It really looks at the watershed, not the lake, so it's a little different than the first one. But, you know, if you are looking for reading material, those 2 watershed plans, one a couple years ago and the other from 86, 87, you know, at least scanning it, it informs you why is there a watershed, why are there zones, and why are the special permits that we have authority to issue, why are they important?
And usually, this isn't our usual watershed special permit application.
Right.
This is more of an egregious event. It's usually, like the bond release we did earlier. It's I want to build a extension on my house, or I want to build, we get a lot of pool requests, or I'm going to change my patio, stuff like that. Stuff that is generally innocuous, but because of where it's being done, has to have extra precautions. And we've kind of updated our how we go about that over the last couple of years to make sure that you're not using certain fertilizers and having deed restrictions, to making sure we're doing or looking at testing in the area and things like that. And it's kind of an evolving process. So we'll get more kind of innocuous ones on a you know, probably every other meeting, like 2 out of 3 meetings, something like that, 1 out of 3. This is just kind of a more severe instance that we're looking at.
So I have a question, and I watched, I think, the last Concom meeting. So I think it was 59, outside of the clear cutting, they were mentioning something about a dock. Is that within our purview? And do we need to address it at all?
So this came up a couple years ago. There are, I think, 14 docks. One of them is clearly grandfathered, that's the Brooks School one. And this summer, there was another new dock. It's a very small one, but there's another one. And this is, Chapter 91, is that right, Jean?
Yes, Chapter 91 is
And the
waterways.
Conservation Commission.
Yeah.
Our lake and boating rules and regulations have a stipulation that docks get permitted through Conservation and Chapter 91.
But it's not part of this tree clearing water. It's not part of the special permit application that they would be applying for. It would be some sort of, it would be separate. As I understand it, it would be separate. It's related in that it's on the same area or property, but
Yep.
it's not part of,
Got it.
it wouldn't be part of this
There.
application.
There was an intersection with this board, what was it, 2 or 3 years ago, Gene? Maybe it was just prior to COVID, where the state was making a change, I think, to the way they handled Chapter 91, and this board got a report of that change, and this was discussed at the board.
Okay, great. All right, so we'll look forward to that coming back to us. Okay, could you get a motion to approve the meeting minutes from June 6th?
So moved.
Motion Second, all in favor of the four of us?
Aye.
Okay, that's approved. Okay, anything else before we adjourn until,
Monday is joint meeting at 7:30.
okay, Monday, joint meeting, 7:30 here.
Yes.
That is the
7:30.
17th, 7:30.
Are you
And
gonna
then
make it? You said you were gonna be out of pocket.
I'm not.
Are you gonna be here, John?
Yeah, I was planning on it.
I'll-
Oh, again, what are they talking about?
Update to the MBTA communities.
Yep.
Okay. And you were gonna have the information, because, about the housing starts and everything of the different types.
I sent you an
think that-
email today,
Okay,
or yesterday.
okay.
I think it was yesterday.
Yeah, I think that's good context, because, I think it's kind of like we gave it the office, and it ought to be evident, I think that's part of the context of this.
So I had also asked for some information. It's a little different take than yours, and I'm putting those numbers together. It's, what is the current total number of single-family versus multifamily and condos? Because I was interested, where do we stand? And then I've just done my own online searches of where do comparable communities stand.
Yeah,
Benchmarking.
it's a little bit, I wanted to, I think there's two things. There's one is what's the current total, and then what's the pattern over the last 5
Correct.
years? Because,
Correct.
frankly, over the last 20 years, there's been a dramatic slowdown in single-family housing and a much larger increase in multifamily. And it's probably even more pronounced over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Not that it's good, bad, or indifferent, it just is what it is.
It's just,
Yeah.
it's good to know, where do we stand?
Yeah.
And so for what is being discussed is, it's good to have a discussion about housing in general, but the specifics is the MBTA community law, which requires our town and many others to have a certain amount of by right multifamily housing in certain locations of certain sizes, certain densities by the end of next year or by next year?
By the end of '24, which leaves us one town meeting between now and then,
Right.
unless we call for a special town meeting. But essentially, North Andover, the total number of units within this district, we need to account for the ability to construct 1,200 units. Not the fact that they're going to be constructed, but we have to have zoning in place. And
Is that 1,200 over the entire town?
No, the minimum is 50 acres of developable land, 25 of which has to be continuous. And the others can be as small as 5, but they have to add up to another 25 of developable. And there's a model. There'll be a presentation at the next meeting. So the state's
Okay,
created.
because, obviously, in order to get there from here, you're gonna have to take some property where there's already existing multifamily.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
you have no other choice.
So you have to find the area where you want it, right? The idea is certainly density is supposed to help improve downtowns. You want it near bus stations or train stations. You want it near walkable communities where they can get to groceries and things with less traffic. And so you're just zoning for it. It's probably developed land already, but again, it's just potential in the future if somebody was to accumulate that property,
Yeah.
they can develop.
And is this briefing going to talk about where those locations might be in town?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission that's presenting, or?
Yes, Yeah, so we are working with them. We got technical assistance dollars for them to help us. And so we've
Do
been
we
meeting.
know what they're gonna come up with, or is this gonna be like a magic reveal at this meeting?
It's not coming up with anything. It's just providing some
Okay.
background. I don't have the draft presentation. I'm supposed to be here today. But we do have areas of town that we want to get some feedback on before we get into kind of the weeds of writing zoning for it.
So my understanding is they've done GIS studies and done different things and mapped out different potential places to kind of look at.
Okay, so it's good to talk to somebody about it.
Well, that's what this is to
Okay.
get your feedback, because then we have to go to the public, because it's going to be, it's a town meeting zoning article, so
Yeah.
we have to
Okay.
get all kinds of public input in September and October, so.
And just to confirm, the 1,200, that's a static number, not a dynamic number. In other words, like 1,200 is not going to change over time, right?
No.
Okay.
No,
I asked
But
them
1,200
that.
must be derived from the acreage. I mean, what's the magic of 1,200? What if you have a town that only has 2,000 people?
It's based on, no, so it's not 12, it's based on a state formula. So it's 1,200 is for North Andover.
it's 10% of our housing units today, and it's 10% because we're considered an adjacent community,
Yeah,
so.
it's not
It-
1,200 for everybody, it's a percentage of
It-
our.
it-
Well, that was a
yes.
little
It's
bit what
15
I
for
was
some,
trying to
and-
understand the
yeah.
magic, how we arrived at
Yeah,
1,200.
there's criteria that you got designated as. Initially, it was gonna be more.
Yeah.
They say we have land within a mile or a half mile of Lawrence's Station, and that's at the end of Mass Ave. And there is land there, but it's not developable. It's the on-ramps and off-ramps of 495. It's that, and so we had to advocate for ourselves and say we can't do that. And so we got designated a different criteria, adjacent community, and so.
I think it was gonna be like 1,600, so it got knocked down a little bit. So, yeah, I mean, again, so this is state mandated zoning. There's not a lot of this, but this is state mandated, so we have to put it somewhere. The question is, where do we put it, and how do we set it up? Do we do it as an overlay over something that already existed, but what problems are with that? Because now you're changing zoning for something that already exists, and what will do, or do you put it somewhere where it may not come to fruition, but maybe in 20 or 30 years, it might be a good place? I mean, those are the kind of questions that we need to be asking. We don't really have a choice about doing it, it's just the best way to do it. Okay, good. And then back here in 2 weeks. Okay, can we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're good.